To go live. Mhm. Hello, hello. Greetings to you all. Thank you so much for jumping on this LinkedIn live event today. My name is Tatiana Kolovu. I live in the southern part of Indiana in the United States, Bloomington, Indiana. And we always kick off by starting asking you to tell us where you're coming in from, which is always kind of a good way to set the context and know where everyone is. Today, I'd like you to also tell me the industry that you're in. I'm interested in knowing why you're interested in the topic of communicating with the bully, and also knowing maybe I can reference some of the industries that you're in. Speaking of, I have spent quite a few years in the human resources arena. I did that for our university before I went on the academic side. So a lot of what I share with you have been stories and anecdotes of what I have experienced in mediating conversations, stepping into opportunities to help leaders manage conflict in teams, or coaching people individually one-on-one in dealing with adverse and bully type behaviors in the workplace. So as we get started in discussing communicating with the bully, I'll tell you that today I'm thrilled that we're bringing in an expert of confidence and leadership, Selena Razvani, a good friend, a LinkedIn instructor, a LinkedIn top voice, a LinkedIn author, and definitely an author of a very popular book, Quick Confidence, a Wall Street Journal bestseller. I'll talk about that in just a little bit as Selena joins us. But today, please note that I won't touch upon the legal side of communicating with the bully or talking about, I want to go on the comment side to see if you are coming in and where you're coming in from. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you for joining us. But I will talk about specifically my strength is in communication and talking about how to approach, how to strategize before you approach. And when you do choose your message and deciding on the channel, how do you communicate that verbally and non-verbally? This is where Selena is going to jump in and help us with that. So without further ado, I see her in the green room. Selena and I met in person for the first time about a year and a half ago in New York City. She had taken the train from Philadelphia and was there in person, and I was so pleased. I hope we can do it again soon. And then soon after that, Selena published this incredible book, Quick Confidence, that has so many snackable bites of information, and it's all based on communication and picking up yourself and getting the strength and confidence to speak. Selena, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Stronger live show. And I can't think of a better person to be with me on Stronger.
Oh, I think the world of you and your work, Tatiana. So I am so excited to be here with your community today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. They're slowly sliding in, but I was telling everyone that the approach today is not for us to talk about the legalities of dealing and addressing the bully in your work life. Or a lot of people in the post were talking specifically about school age children. I know you have them. I in the past have had a lot of mediation, I would say, or helping our kids deal with some of this in the school world. But this is mostly workplace related. And I want to stay and focus with that. My background has and involves a lot of work in human resources. But I know, Selena, I've been wanting to have you on the show on this topic specifically, and I waited for your availability because you have so much content on LinkedIn. You put so many useful scenarios and role plays with yourself on TikTok. Tell me how people react to this and what you've learned from giving these practical tips.
It's been so interesting to see how people react. And, I like to tell people when I was a kid, I don't know about if you've seen those big yellow boxes of chocolates, but I was really enamored by those. And I used to love to flip it over and look at the key of all the different chocolate flavors on the back.
The ones that have, when you open them, they show all of the different.
Exactly. They show everything that's back there. And I think for so many of us, we wish there was such a thing in the workplace that was like this quick reference.
Yeah.
How do I deal with this sticky situation? My boss reacting a certain way, a colleague, kind of who's diminishing me? What's the quick reference? What do I need to know? And I know I've searched for that in my own corporate career and didn't find it. So
Yeah.
when I create content, I'm trying to get to some of those sticky conversations, those difficult coworker interactions that no one necessarily teaches you about in college or in onboarding at a new company.
Sure. It's all based on experience. And maybe you don't hit something specifically on the spot, but you give them the confidence to say, that sounded really fluid, or that sounded very natural. I'm going to play with it. I'm going to practice it. And we'll talk about some of the strategies. I wanted to say hi to a lot of our friends. Someone's coming in from Rhode Island. I just booked my tickets,
Oh,
Annette, to visit our son who goes to school there next week. So it's a good quick jump from Boston through Indianapolis. Brazil forever. Welcome, and Stacy from St. Louis. I love how international this group is.
yeah.
Cheers to Ontario, Canada, and Austin, Texas. So as we're talking about, I think when I first started talking, I must admit, confess that in the conversations and in the feed, when I posted my Stronger newsletter, I started to have conversations in private messages of people really telling me what's happening. I kind of became sort of like I would say a back channel discussion on the conversations about bullies, and this is happening constantly. I feel so bad for a lot of our learners that deal with this on a constant basis. But maybe you agree with me, Selena, that you need to be on your toes and to put your hand out and say stop. Maybe not clearly say stop, but how you address it, or to tell them that you recognize that they're doing it, is one way to stop it. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think this can go so underreported. So I think the fact that about a fifth of individuals, professionals who are working, report being bullied, I
Wow.
think that may be low because I think many people know it's a real maze to make it known, to speak up to HR or a manager about it. And absolutely, look, if this sounds like you and you're wondering, where do I start or where do I go from here with a bully? Assertive communication is a really great starting point.
Great.
Setting up a boundary. I won't be spoken to like that. The
Mhm.
next time you speak like that, I'm going to walk away from the
Sure.
conversation.
Sure.
Asserting those boundaries. This is the time to bring that firm language.
Sure. And we will talk today on context, that maybe it's our friend is saying here, I'm terrible at dealing with the bully. I need help. Thanks for teaching us. And we thank you for jumping in, because quite often the bully is not your colleague, it's your boss. And then it gets a lot trickier. I like how you talk about boundaries. And in fact, I was looking for content specific on your book and you do mention boundaries. But before any of this, I do think taking the side of the bullies, I have quite a big empathetic side on thinking, why are they acting the way they are? And
Mhm.
quite often I may think there's a lot of analysis to do of, maybe it's a confidence thing, or maybe they have gotten by with this and before, or maybe no one has ever said anything. No one has said,
Yeah.
look, you can't do this. This is not okay. And being able to stop that. Do you think so? Do you give an excuse that this is why bullies bully? Because no one has said, time up?
I think a lot of times they're good at what they do. They're good at intimidating, right?
Yeah,
Or they're good at making people feel crummy and like a weaker version of themselves. So I think a lot of bullies are effective at this and haven't been checked by someone,
sure.
haven't been maybe given a consequence or a firm boundary or limit. So those things are your friend. There's a beautiful saying like, you teach other people how to see you, how to treat you, right? That we're constantly every day teaching others, and we can and need to teach a bully, not okay.
Not okay. Yeah,
Yeah. And that just as a follow-up to that, if you think about assertiveness for a moment, like a spectrum, on one hand, there may be somebody who is kind of passive, not very comfortable, sharing their perspective, and maybe kind of treats the other person like your needs are more important than mine.
Mhm, mhm.
All the way on the other end is that domineering type. Like my needs are more important than
Than
yours.
yours. Mhm.
And what I want to encourage people is that there's this magic middle, and I call it healthy entitlement.
Sure,
And what it's saying is your needs are no more or less important than mine.
sure.
It's clear, it's honest, it's direct. And I like to think that's a healthy way to communicate in all our relationships,
Yeah.
not just with a bully.
Do you think that people in all situations, we identify a person has gotten away with it, continues to do it, it has worked for them, no one calls it on a timeout. Do people create or depict bullying behavior because they mean to? Are they just so insecure about something? So they're going to come across as very passive aggressive because that's all they know how to do.
Hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think there's different flavors of bullies. I think there's aggressive, right? Where sometimes it's out in the open,
Yeah.
hostility and contempt and being demeaning to others. It's not hidden at all. And I think it's trickier when it is passive aggressive, when there's eye
Mm,
rolling. You gave your idea in a meeting and they're rolling their eyes, or
yeah.
maybe diminishing you in a quieter way.
Or
Um,
creating alliances, talking behind your back
mhm,
when you know it's happening, or giving you the cold shoulder. That's the bullying stuff. And I hate to admit it, I ended a friendship not too long ago by pretty much saying, not enough, no more. This is not going to fly. And
good
I
for
was
you. Good for
like,
you.
yeah, it cost me a lot of energy to do, but I decided that I was not integrity, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, of thinking of what are your values. For
Mm,
me, integrity is number one. If someone doesn't treat me with that, it's not worth to work with them or be friends with them. And it was a tricky situation because it was work and friends together, and the work has continued to kind of be sort of a status quo, but the friendship is lost, and it was
mhm,
sad. But to me, I was not treated how I wanted to be, and they didn't have the skills to communicate of what the problem was. So
yeah.
it created that passive aggressiveness. And at the end of the day, it was best for my mental health to say my piece, no, get no response, but be okay with that and be able to walk away. Sadly, in workplaces, we're kind of stuck with people, and we
Mhm,
can't do
mhm,
that. We can't sever relationships. So today, I wanted to talk specifically about that. We have some more friends, a friend from Sri Lanka that's visiting us, and we have Memphis, Tennessee, and Washington, D.C., and London, UK. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. And this is also being recorded, so we'll post it on our LinkedIn platforms, both Selena and I. So I wanted to share a little bit of the context and strategy before we talk about actually what are you going to say. Um, or maybe let's talk about what here Amanda is sharing first, and then we'll jump into that. She said, I've seen peers who learn from a toxic manager and behave like it's okay to address people horribly in a workplace. The fear of retaliation and isolation is real. So not surprising, 1 in 5 speak up. I can speak up in personal life, but work environment brings fear and consequences. So try to be, and Amanda, I hope you will be that person who will become an ally and try to help that person speak up, to say, Selena, did you hear how Bob spoke to you? That's not okay. I want
mhm.
you to think about saying something, or maybe if you're not being the one that's approached in this way. I wanted to share, maybe help Shelby, you can help us behind the scenes. We talked a little bit about having a strategy that involves, I talked about values first, knowing what your values
Mhm.
are, that you're not willing to have I would say, questioned or to be violated in this way.
Yeah.
And then, speaking of that, boundaries. And in your book, Selena, I was looking at the part where you talked about setting clear limits, and spot on. Knowing what your limits are involves identifying or being aware of your values. If you haven't stopped to think about that, that you think that is not okay. And then part of your strategy before you say a word or practice or rehearse a word, figuring out who are your allies, who is supportive to
Yeah.
you, who are your people you're going to call up in the workplace or outside in your advisory board and say, help, I need some coaching through this. So knowing your values, being clear on your boundaries, which I think is so helpful in your book, because many people never have permission for and seeking for support. Can you speak to one or all of these?
Yeah, I'm especially drawn to the piece on boundaries. It's something that took me longer to learn on a personal level. And a quick example of that was even kind of feeling this sense that people can ask me a question and kind of have an all access pass to me. And I didn't realize till I came up in my 30s, like, wait a minute, I can create the fence around what I'm willing to talk about, let's say at work, because
Mhm.
plenty of people will ask you questions that can feel out of bounds. Why are you going to so many doctor appointments? Why don't you have kids yet? Um, what, like any number of questions
Nosy.
that
Mhm.
to one person might just be pesky and annoying. To somebody else, they could be fine. To someone else, they really don't want to answer it
Yeah.
and set a precedent, right? That now you expect me to answer anything. Hey, did you get married yet? Like, why not? All of these things.
Yeah.
And so I think giving yourself that big yellow permission slip that I get to set the boundaries around what's comfortable for me. And I found it's really helpful to have a few sentence starters to do
Mhm.
that with, let's say, out of bounds questions. Just even one being as simple as questioning the question,
Question. Yes. Did I
not
hear
rushing
you right?
in.
Are you asking me why I'm going to so many? So a lot
Yes,
of that is the person may say, "Oh no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I said." I love the repeating what you hear.
right. If somebody says to you, Uh, did you gain a lot of weight? Or something like this, you can kind of
Yeah,
say, did you really just ask me that?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so realize you have power in this. You have maneuverability and adaptability. You don't have to just take the bait and go, well, and
yeah,
launch into your answer. You can make a comment about the question itself. You can say something a little playful and humorous. You could say, you first.
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
You go first. I want to hear your plan for having kids.
Sure. Don't you think though sometimes we get caught off guard? So what we may perceive as nosy, we think I answered that. In hindsight, that was nosy and I wasn't prepared. We always look back.
Oh,
And
yeah.
part of what you establish or encourage people with your newsletter, Quick Confidence, to do is constantly, have this at if you read about it, the next time this happens to you, you at least will ask the question back. And
Right,
then,
that's right,
Mhm.
and you don't need 300 scripts memorized or anything. That's the beauty of this. If I share 5 or 6 and you remember 1, that's a win.
Yeah, yeah,
"Huh, what makes you ask?"
yeah,
Or, "That's a strange question to ask someone."
yeah,
Right? If you remember only one of those, you are better off, you're more empowered and equipped the next time someone makes you uncomfortable, or
yeah.
maybe you see them do it to someone else.
Um, Shelby is asking or saying she's an oversharer. And so she does it to herself. She says, how do we make sure as an oversharer, we're not stepping out of bounds ourselves? It's different, Shelby, if you share this about you and if it stops at saying, now what about you? If the other person, it's whatever is authentic and feels right to you. I don't think we should prescribe how
Mhm.
much we share because everyone feels a different level of familiarity and everyone has a different fence around them as far as privacy is concerned. But every context and every person is different and that's what we focus on.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan too of, you could ask the question too if you're wondering, like, "Can I share something with you about that?" and you kind of gauge their reaction. If someone's,
Mhm.
you know, a little transactional about it, they probably aren't inviting more, or
Sure,
they're not ready or maybe the right listener to hear your personal story.
for sure.
Um,
I
yeah.
want our learners today to think about, maybe don't go to the extreme. Don't think of sort of the screaming belligerent bully that you have faced in your life. Someone on the feed said, I've been dealing with this, or I left a job because of this. Of course, the consequences are always for the person being bullied to leave, because the bully, unless they're addressed, they usually will continue to do this. But I want you to think about, if this happens again, or when this happens in a new situation. There's quite a lot of emotional baggage in old situations. Think of what your approach would be as you have this. So we talked about knowing what your values are and what your boundaries are, and knowing where to get support. Who is your Selena to call, or your Tatiana to get advice, or where do you go to read, or where do you find information that can give you some support, to continue. The next step is to decide how you're going to communicate, how you're going to say, did you really ask me that? Or here's, you're addressing the bully. First, you need to decide on what your channel of communication is, because in the newsletter I talked about, you are face to face verbally communicating this, but the reality is that it could be you're on a virtual call like what we are now. You could be on a phone call. You may have to put this in writing. In fact, you probably should, to create some background knowledge, organizational, kind of keeping track of things. So you decide what's best, how it's best to do this. And then you have to think of both your nonverbals and your verbals. Selena, you do a lot in your examples on body language, eye contact, gestures, keeping your chin up as you speak, even a little bit of a smile, or even a slowing down of the pace on all the nonverbals, and then the verbal side of exactly what you say, which, my friends, all of you here today, you really need to rehearse this and role play it with others.
Yes, I really love your prompts that you're giving people. I think they're so useful. And I think it can really help to have the body language too, because a lot of the research says between our verbal message and our body, people are most likely to believe what our body says. So
Yeah.
even if they're in conflict, we're going to trust what the body says. And so, one of the techniques I really love for either a bully or maybe like a toxic, sour person, maybe this is like a gossip who comes up to you in your cubicle or your office
Yeah.
and kind of likes to trash other people, and you're not really here for it. It's called gray rock, the gray rock method.
Huh.
And it's
Love
just
it.
what it sounds like, in that it's boring, like a gray rock. So you don't give them a lot to go on.
Mm,
Physically, they might come to you with that juicy piece of gossip, and you kind of might shrug or
mm,
not even look up from your papers as they're telling you this.
mhm.
Um, right? You're not getting excitable, or the eyes lighting up at this piece of gossip. You're really neutralizing and keeping that poker face. It's a little way to disengage from somebody you have to be around, that
Sure.
gray rock, to protect yourself.
Sure.
um, and I think the other thing we can do, it sounds really simple, but it's an important reminder: be very open to excusing yourself quickly and often. I really need to get somewhere.
Yeah.
I have to hand in such and such. I'm on my way. I have to be on my way somewhere. Avoid that person physically, not hanging out where they do, not eating lunch where they do. And you used a word, Tatiana, earlier that I think really relates to this, and maybe it doesn't sound like it on the surface: energy.
Mhm.
You only have so much energy in
Mhm.
a day, in a week. This is not a renewable resource. We only have so much in a day.
True.
Um, so spend it wisely. You may not choose every battle with every bully in every workplace, and
Yeah.
that's okay too. You can decide, Given my tenure here, I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm not going to choose to confront so and so
Sure.
because maybe that's what's going to keep your peace and
And
protect your peace.
and it may be that you really need to keep the peace of where you are and not address anything, because when you do, there'll be consequences of you getting uh, turned into assignments you don't want, or projects that are more difficult, that you need to be diplomatic. I'm not sure of what everyone's situation is, but I wanted to show you, as a result of a lot of the conversation, and I must say this struck up a lot of conversation. We had sharing that I've asked, I grabbed, maybe I asked, let's say, Sam, one of our learners, to share specific examples. And Sam shared things such as, identified what the bully was doing: unreasonable task assignments. They delegate tasks that require their specific expertise without providing necessary guidance. The classic move, like, I'm going to make you look stupid by
Mhm.
asking you to do something you are not trained to do, or I hoard the skills and information. Public criticism and mistrust. They openly question the quality and value of my work, especially in front of leadership without constructive feedback. That makes my blood boil. And this
Yeah.
is the people I want to coach to say. And I wanted to ask you, what would you recommend saying in front and in part of a meeting, respectfully, but also kind of saying, not on my watch? And finally, vague and threatening feedback. They provide unclear and intimidating feedback on my submissions without offering actionable details for improvement. So this learner is very familiar of what needs to happen. And we had a conversation back and forth of, pick your battles, choose one that has a specific actionable response. And then I'm going to share a little bit the SBI model. But do you see this as your typical? There were probably 7 more, by the way, to
Yeah.
this share, but I chose the 3 that were a little bit more actionable. Do you see this? Do you see more of this? Because bullying is not a physical threatening. It's not going to get to the point where it's so belligerent. It's this kind of stuff, right?
It is. And the most common version I hear is peer to peer.
Mm,
And that's not to say it's not difficult when it's a higher up, like a boss.
okay.
But in some ways, it's really tricky when it's a peer. For
Mm,
example, one of the things I hear about that relates to your list there is that first one, kind of being assigned or delegated work. Maybe you're on a team and we're divvying up the project, getting the undesirable tasks, um, being talked to as though you're that person's direct report and not their peer. This
mhm.
happened to me in my own career at one point. And one of the things I'd recommend if you are getting delegated things to you, Tatiana, why don't you take the notes and I'll present to the client,
Yeah.
like that kind of thing.
Mhm, mhm,
Get some air cover from your boss.
mhm.
Contract with your boss. You need some of those fallbacks that you can cite with a bully like this, so that you could say to your boss, "Hey, I want to make sure I get clear with you on, can I decline work that is not mission critical or that's not within this scope of my role? Do I have your blessing to do that? Because from time to time, I'm getting asked to do things that are not the best use of my time." Just to give you that added confidence to say no to that person.
Sure.
I'm working with my manager. I'm declining things that are not mission critical at this point. So you're
That
going to look to someone else for that.
That is lovely if you have that support. I always say, and in the Stronger newsletter, I said, find what's in it for them. And you can go to your boss and say, you hired me to do X, Y, and Z. I want to make sure we win on this. And I need the time to
Mhm.
focus. Doing, you know, A, B, and C is not, it's taking away from my time. And I want to help you shine. So you always take it into what's in it for them.
Yes.
Even if the bully is your boss asking you to do this. I've got a couple of questions before we get to SBI. Stacy says, what if your boss's boss dismisses you when you go to them? it's not at a point, and it's not at a point to bring it to HR. I would also caution you, Stacy, is to really dig in and practice some of the things that we're saying. You need to speak up and also start to keep track of your own records of what exactly has happened. Because the reality is, our workplace has changed a lot in the last 5 and 10 years, I would say, since I worked in HR, that you really could put together a case that people cannot ignore anymore. Some of these behaviors, if they're documented, are not ignored. It's tough when it's the passive aggressiveness. Would you say that?
Oh, I think it's really tough. And I believe there's such a thing as the vague no, the kind of being dismissed in whatever it is you're bringing up to somebody. Maybe it's a proposal you're making to better the organization or a group or make it more inclusive. Maybe it's a reporting issue that you're telling them something is happening and you're feeling dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
My advice would be insist on objective criteria.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be waved away with some surface level no. And I think that's true whether you're pitching to advance your career and you're being told, I don't think you're C-level material or
Sure.
whatever it may be. Or if you're putting something else in front of someone and they're just saying, maybe I'll look at this later. Even if you have to make somebody uncomfortable, I would encourage you to say, what exactly is this lacking that you need to see more of?
Yeah.
Or what would need to be true, in order for you to take a look at this? And ask, I'm a big fan of get curious, not furious.
Yeah, I love
Ask
that
the
line.
questions, peel the onion back, because sometimes the initial reason a person gives you or the kind of presenting issue is not the real issue. So
Exactly.
assert yourself, use that assertive communication, that those searching diagnostic questions. Can you tell me more about that? I hear you telling me no.
Mm-hmm.
How did you arrive at that conclusion?
Or
Those questions.
you can say, if this was the perfect project I brought to you, what would that look like? If you can
Yes.
help them visualize that, that's very helpful. I love that Ashek is here. Ashek used to be in the many, many years ago, my student, but he says, regardless the unreasonable task assignments, they may also push for a task they cannot do themselves, speaking of the reason behind this, and even practically feasible given the current circumstances. And
Mhm.
Ashek, that's where at this point you can be very factual. You can say, from what I understand, this task needs A, B, and C. Here's
Mhm.
the skills that I have. Here's the ones that I don't. I recommend we get those, or we can bring in this person. So if you dissect it, it could be possibly that the person is cornering you because they feel like they are going to be exposed by not being able to do it. Once you have that conversation, they know, it's sort of the emperor is wearing no clothes, and as the children's book references, and that's becomes much more easy to deal with. Again, the theme here has been, you need to not only expose the bully, but by speaking back, as Selena said, showing them that you understand exactly what they're doing, even if it's passive aggressive behavior. Describe the behavior.
And if I could, Tatiana, I just want to dovetail off that and something Ashek raised, which is, you said, what are you seeing earlier? One of the other things I see is like credit stealing or idea stealing and claiming
Mm-hmm.
as a negative behavior. And if that's you, if that sounds like something you faced or want to be ready for, if you do face it, and someone's kind of taking credit in a meeting, you can say something like, thank you, Joe, for highlighting my campaign, my project. I want to quickly clarify the roles.
Yeah,
Joe,
exactly.
Joe was able to do the financials while I oversaw the project from the beginning. So take that moment. Take that moment right then and there. It doesn't have to be hostile or scary or this big showdown, but
Yeah.
you can clarify if you do not like how things are being framed, it's not accurate, it's not right.
Yeah.
Speak up in that moment.
in being factual and describing, not describing and saying, well, Joe seems to be hogging the floor, like you're making a criticism towards Joe, but in response you can say Joe did a lot of work on the finance side. However, the rest of this was something I spend a lot of time on. I just wanted to clarify that. So again, with all of our learners, our listeners, it may be that you're not attuned or you're not alerted to this, and then you leave that meeting going, God, I should have said something. And hopefully with this motivation you will. I wanted to close with what I always recommend, and maybe Selena, you have another verbiage recommendation that you have in your book, is the Center for Creative Leadership's SBI model.
Mhm.
Describe the situation, describe the behavior, and talk about impact. On the impact side, remember how I said earlier, if you're talking to, I need to spend my time doing high impact projects, or find what the currency is and point to that currency. So if the impact is that I don't have time to do the work that's going to make you and help you shine, you need to mention that impact. But can you describe, in the meeting the other day, when you were describing X, Y, and Z, again, describe the behavior? And this is where you seemed to me, it looked to me as if you were rolling your eyes, or you sort of puffed, and it came across as if you weren't. And at this point, I see bullies go, oh, no, that's not what I meant.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of to read between the lines. Like, they know, and you're calling their bluff. You probably don't even need to get to the impact side of that. That doesn't, it's not necessary. It harms trust with the rest of the group. Do you use the SBI model? Do you have another formula that we can share with our learners?
Yeah, I love the SBI model, and I think it's really effective because there are some diminishing behaviors, some that it is feasible somebody doesn't know they're doing it. And one example of that is talking over, interrupting in a meeting. This is not okay, and it's certainly not okay with a serial interrupter. But let's just say it's not in someone's consciousness, like they're somehow not grasping that they're doing it. SBI is a great time, a great thing you could use to address it with them. Joe, I saw you cut me off 4 different times in that meeting back there. What's going on? Or, can you tell me where you're coming from with this? Can I please bring this to your awareness and ask you to stop? And I'm a big fan of initially the non-judgmental observation, if it's something that could be innocent or somehow unconscious, meaning, can you describe it in factual ways?
Mm-hmm,
Not
mm-hmm.
going into what they intended, because we don't know what they intended.
Right.
Why go down that road? But instead, the factual, hey, you cut me off 4 different times in the meeting.
Describing the behavior and the
That's great.
situation.
And giving them the floor and the opportunity. I wanted to just share a positive story, which is this happened to one woman in a group I trained and coached. She raised it to her manager, who was the one who was doing the cutting off and the interrupting in private. And he was like horrified. He did this, and believe it or not, in the next meeting as a group, addressed it openly with everyone. And
Wow.
said, I'm very sorry. I did this. And I'd like us to hold each other responsible. I'm going to hold myself to a higher standard. But that's my other piece of advice. If you are somewhere, like Amanda said earlier, where the norm is bullying, where the norm is negative behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
consider, the group co-creating some new norms.
Norms. Yeah.
Microsoft, great companies do this. They don't expect that everyone just kind of knows what to aspire to in interactions and meetings. They write it down,
Yeah.
and it becomes like a code. So another suggestion, if you want to make a more of a cultural, broader change with bullies.
I had the same example that was nonverbal. A leader would hear new ideas, and he was a very thoughtful, he would sort of close his eyes, and have you seen listeners like this put his head in his hand, frown, his whole face would
Mm,
shrink as he listened. And when I came into that mediation situation, everyone said he dismisses all of our ideas.
mm,
And I thought, he doesn't come across like that to me, but okay, let me get to know him. Let me get to observe some meetings. And I saw those nonverbals and brought it to him. And I said, do you realize, there's three things: eyes closed, head and hands, big frown on your forehead. You cannot be doing this as the leader. They think you hate it from the get-go. Such
mm,
an easy fix. I came to tell him that, but for everyone here in the live today, is they're going to be the ones that have to describe it. So again, as we said, describe behavior. Selena, if you don't mind, can we go back to those three scenarios and
yeah.
dissect of kind of how would you approach each of these unreasonable task assignments? So the boss, and in this case, we're going to escalate it because this is what the boss is giving you, or delegating tasks that require their specific expertise without providing necessary guidance or training. How would you start that? I'm catching you a little off guard, or maybe I can do it if you want to take turns.
Yeah, sure. No, but look, I think everything's negotiable.
Mm-hmm,
And to me, this looks like a big fat negotiation, an unreasonable task assignment. There
mm-hmm.
is probably a way for this work to be accomplished and for you to get what you need, that win-win type of thinking, but it's not going to happen on its own, and it's not going to land on your lap in like a silver tray ready to go.
Sure.
It's probably going to be something you need to advocate and lobby for. So there's a few ways you could do that. You could kind of come at it from the cautionary tale perspective. Listen, I'm feeling like I'm lacking the details I need to manage this project well. And I'm really concerned that XYZ is going to happen, right? It
So,
won't succeed. It's going to get derailed. It's not going to meet so and so executive sponsors' expectations, So, kind of the cautionary tale. Um, I'd like to avoid that happening, and I need and make a clear ask. I'm asking for training, or I'm asking for a mentor, asking for 2 weeks of such and such to get up to speed on this. Um, Bring the solution. And I would say even better, bring some
yes.
alternatives.
So two things that you said resonate: bring the solution, or solutions, plural. Second, show them what the impact can be. Again, they don't want one of the projects on their watch to fail.
Mhm.
So bring that in from the beginning. I would also even add one of those: you're a master at this, Selena. I want to know how to do this as well, so you don't have to get involved at this level.
Mhm.
Can you help me? Again, a little bit of the ego stroke, depending on the situation. I would do it in the case where I think that would travel, because a lot of bullies do it because they are insecure. And maybe in this case, the person does have the expertise and they're holding it back from you. So you fail. But
Mhm.
you're pulling the cover. You are unveiling that and showing that you know and you see. What about the second one? Public criticism and mistrust. This, to me, is completely unacceptable. And I would hope that our learners catch it in the first place, but they may not be as quick with this. So this may be a conversation after the fact. Would you put something like this in writing?
Mhm.
Would you ask for a face-to-face meeting? Or, I have something to
Yeah.
share at the end of this call. Would you mind if you take a few minutes? Where would you put this verbiage?
Yeah, first of all, about the question of putting it in writing, yes, yes, 1,000 times yes.
Mhm.
And so even if you're like, this hasn't reached HR status, as one person said, Stacy, thank you. Or it doesn't feel legal or serious, I would still encourage you to write things down with a timestamp. On June 3rd,
Mhm.
X verbatim quote was said to me. if
Mhm.
only for your own case that you
Yeah.
may need to create, if only for clarifying your own thinking on the matter. That is all worth it. And I promise if you try to, kind of keep it in memory, it's you're not going to remember it all. So
Yeah.
I think it's a really smart practice to cover yourself and do that no matter what, if somebody is being this bully or jerk to you. If there's that public criticism in front of leadership, you need to protect your own reputation,
Mhm.
right? Nobody is your hired PR person at the company who's going to do that for you. Nobody's going to do it for you. So I think you need to be very protective of your reputation. In that moment, I would not be afraid to say, you know what, Jane, that's actually not the the factual run of events as I have it. Here's actually what
Yeah.
happened. And
Mhm.
if you're painted in a light that you've made mistakes or you did wrong things, correct it right then and there. In
Yeah.
fact, that's not the chronology of what happened. Let me share how it went down and do it right then and there. If you did make a mistake, own it and
Admit it.
share how, in the name of learning, you're using it to be better. It's
Yeah.
okay if you made a mistake. All those leaders who are listening, they have made mistakes. They've been part of
Absolutely.
projects that are flops and fails
Yeah.
that went over budget or over timeline or something. So if you did make mistakes, say it, and say, and we've taken that into our future steps. We put X in place to prevent it. Um, but it's okay to be fiercely protective of your reputation. You've worked hard to build it.
And no one, as you said, is going to be your PR
No,
representative.
that's right.
So be alert, be on your toes, uncover or be vulnerable in saying, I don't know, I need your help. Kind of bring them on your side specifically. The public criticism to me is the quick snap of what you need to do to stop. The final one, vague and threatening feedback. Now, there's a lot of, as you and I, and we all communicate, we have what we call mental filters, that we filter everything through things that have happened to us in the past. And I want to always acknowledge the fact that if I may be too sensitive to feedback because someone blew up in my face in public 10 years ago in a job and I've never overcome that, I'm always going to be triggered.
Mm.
And being aware of, exactly how much, maybe asking someone, or when you see it happen, or clarifying it. So identifying it. Did I hear you say this, or you repeated this word? I wanted to clarify, what does that mean? So
Yeah.
again, they know that if they do it, you are hearing them and you are in a way saying, no more, don't do that. So on that threatening and vague feedback, I would specifically identify this. Now, for Sam, our learner that shared this with me, I said, pick your top priority with one of these. You cannot address all of this together. It would be impossible to make the point that you hear it and see it. And you probably would be too emotional to bring it up. So choose your battles, as you said, and choose the one battle you're going to go into war with. And you
Yes.
want to win that.
And this is a different level of threat. This is a different level, and there's often more protections in place if you are being threatened. So if someone said something that sounds like a veiled or possible or outright threat, I would say, you know, that sounded like, and then fill in the blank. That sounded like a threat. Is that
Mm-hmm.
what you meant?
Mm-hmm.
And don't assume, right? You're asking the question, you're letting them clarify, but I think this is strategic too. This is not just communication and clarifying for the sake of clarifying. You also want them to come out and say it. If
Yeah.
they're making a veiled threat, you
Yeah.
need to record that and know
Yeah.
that, not in a cutesy way or a
Mhm.
casual way. You probably want them to say it in black and white so you can capture it and share it
Mhm.
right away.
This is where we talked about nonverbals, being firm, being calm, using eye contact, no disclaimers. Oh, I thought it's that just, think it sounds like really practice some of those verbals,
Oh,
and it
right.
will help you.
Yes, that direct eye contact, for example, like that direct engaged eye contact, not the bouncing, um,
Yeah,
all over the place contact. Really looking that person in the eye and saying, "John, I'm asking you not to speak to me that way." It's different than when you're speaking in, your quieter, more relaxed voice, uh,
hmm,
or just making that casual eye contact.
absolutely. I have one more comment that I'll share, and then we'll say our farewells because I think this is important. Marie Claire says, notice you have viewers from all over the world. In light of this advice, what advice would you give professionals who work in environments that are very hierarchical and that speaking up for yourself could be seen as confrontational, disrespectful, or even as insubordination? That piece where I said you're stroking the ego comes from my background of a very patriarchal society where I grew up in Greece, of leaders or just power focused, at least in the olden days, as I grew up, of wanting to make sure that they are staying in that powerful position. I would approach it in this situation of, as I'm trying to help you be the best that you can with this project, us and you, but you've got to find some way to communicate. Selena, some of the direct communication that we're coaching here would be difficult to do in another culture, but I do still think it's necessary.
And I think, Marie Claire, I love your comment and I appreciate you raising it. I think there's a way to kind of come across and convey it's you and I versus the problem
Yeah,
in front of us. It's not you versus me. It's not me, little old me down here, and you up here.
yeah,
Okay. I think you can respect another person's status or power and not make yourself small.
yeah, yeah,
So don't be too deferential. I implore you. There's an old saying I love, and it says, if you put somebody up on a pedestal, don't be surprised if they start to look down on you.
yeah,
And you don't want that.
yeah,
There's no need. So please interact with the person, not the power,
yeah.
not, you know, David Jones, the CFO of this Fortune 50 company, but the
Mhm.
flesh and blood human being.
Of this person, absolutely. And do not hold back from speaking back. You may have to change, as you said, the approach of, I want to help us solve this. We're in this together. I'm
Yeah.
spending a lot of this time to help us win. And here's what I need. This is why I'm coming to you. I don't think, now I wouldn't in that situation do that publicly for sure, because that may be perceived in a higher power distance culture as being definitely more um, uh, confrontational or disrespectful. I will leave it to this. And Samuel asks, we could go on forever. What if you're dealing with a bully client? This is a different layer. It's not a boss, it's not a colleague, it's a client that's a bully. And on this quote, Sam, I would say, again, what are your values? What are your boundaries? And what are you willing to communicate? I don't think, Selena, you would say it any differently. I've fired clients in the past because I'm not willing to negotiate on things that they may be wanting. I don't know about you.
Right. And look, that's the beauty of contracts too, and a scope, right?
Hmm.
Because scope creep happens. Sometimes a client's a bully or they're asking for many things outside of scope. And so having that document to keep your partnership true and honest and addressing it assertively when it goes out of scope. You may need to do some influencing in your organization if it's normal to let clients kind of
Yeah,
roam free. You may
yeah,
need to say, "Hey, can we get together on a boundary type conversation with XYZ client?" Um, because
uh,
it's getting out of hand.
Yeah.
Um,
Get some support from the people around you for sure. That's what we talked about.
and in
Well,
some cases, people will take unless you say,
no
this
more.
has to stop. This is
Absolutely.
out of
Yeah,
scope, it's out of bounds. So again, you're teaching them how to view you in your day-to-day actions. Make it a good training.
for sure. Well, I wanted to close by saying a huge big thank you to Selena and to you all for coming on board. Do we have, Shelby, a way to raffle off a stronger? I just realized we didn't do that. No, we'll do that at a different time. Okay. But I do want to just hold Selena's book up one more time and say many of these, yeah, yay, many of these uh, scenarios or dialogues are in the book, or the specific practical things. Corinne, thank you so much for sharing that. And also follow Selena on LinkedIn and on TikTok if you want to share with us, so we can share on the feed. We can share your handle, because I find a lot of what you share super, super helpful and very insightful too. So I want to say a huge heartfelt thank you for your time, Selena. We've already dropped your newsletter that comes in once a week, the link to your book, the link to your contact. And for all of you that joined us here today, thank you so much for following. I'll be back in April talking about authenticity and communication. I'll be on my own, so it's a one-person show. Hope you can join us there, and we will raffle off one of our tumblers then. So come back in April and we'll promote that. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day, and go out there and speak back to your bullies. Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye.